Yes.
All right. And everybody can hear me and see me okay. I assume we've been having a little chat. Thank you so much. Well, good morning from Portland, Oregon, and hope you're having a lovely day, whatever time it is where you are. It's my pleasure to be here presenting as part of the Fashion AI Academy's Fashion Friday. My name is Jenna Nesbitt. I have a long background in the fashion industry. I studied fashion design in Chicago and have been working in the industry for over 15 years. I've held a lot of positions from sort of the ground up, working in retail, as I mentioned, like doing visual merchandising and setting windows and floors for retail shops. And then I've done technical design, which is, breaking down a garment into the engineering process and actually preparing it for production. And then, the real thing that I love doing is like kind of working where fashion and technology meet. So I've also been a trend forecaster for many years. I worked with a very large company here in the US, sort of helping them to align their product assortment across stores and departments. So I've always sort of landed in this place where vision is part of the process. But within that, a big piece that I did in trend forecasting was looking at print and pattern and textile and sort of putting all of those pieces together. So currently I work for a company called Pinecrest Fabrics. We are a fabric supplier and also do customized solutions like fabric printing and a variety of digital methods. So I'm very passionate about both textile and print, and then have been experimenting with AI since the early 2020 or so. I started training my own models and then played around with 3D design and sort of came back once Midjourney had become such a robust tool and I was seeing things that people were creating with it. And I think it's a great place for folks like us that are creative to explore our imagination and bring together ideas and explore, corners of our mind that maybe we didn't even know. So that's kind of a little bit of a background about me. I also am an educator at the Portland Fashion Institute. I've been teaching kind of secondary level fashion courses and design courses for about 8 years now here in the Portland metro area. So currently I am teaching a class on AI for fashion design. This is just like one small segment of what we're doing in those longer courses. So there'll be an opportunity for you to reach out to me after the class if you want to learn more about these online courses that I do through the Portland Fashion Institute or other workshops that we'll be running in future sessions. So again, it's my pleasure to be here as your instructor and facilitating this. And I'll turn it over to Frankie or Marina if either of you have anything to add about Fashion AI before I move into the actual presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Francesca. I am the founder of Fashion AI. So you can find us mainly on Discord. We do weekly AI fashion competitions, mainly with Midjourney, but we have some amazing prompt engineers that also use some more advanced tools. And our competitions are a great way of conceiving concepts, but ultimately we need to get them to something tangible. So either digital fashion, through 3D technologies like Blender, or physical fashion. So this workshop is to really help move from the AI concepts to actual physical production of garments. And I hope you all find it very useful.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we'll go ahead and just start kind of, now that you know a little bit about me, my background, what qualifies me to share this information with you, we'll get into our workshop. So today we'll be covering sort of the basics of print design. So there may be some of you in this room that are familiar with sort of surface design and repeat seamless patterns, but this should be a good review just to help you think about some of the terminology and the ways that we think about surface design as we apply it to textiles or wallpaper or any place that you might need, a repeating seamless design. So the first place we're going to start is just by talking about prints in general. I'm going to show some traditional prints, so made by, the human hand by a print artist. Most of these are about 10 years old or so. I find that it makes it a little easier for us to see things when they're not quite in the current trends, just being able to look at them from a little bit more subjective standpoint. So I'm going to show you a variety of these, and hopefully it'll kind of get your brain moving forward. So Here is the geometric classification. As you can see here, there's a large amount of variety behind what can kind of constitute a geometric print, but really what it is, something made with a shape, as we would think about like a triangle, a circle, rectangle, and the combinations of those shapes, make a geometric pattern. On the left here, we see something that's a little bit more folk or almost like stained glass, whereas in the middle, it has, a bit of that hand-drawn modern style. It's added a bit more texture with the use of the lines and the softness of the curves. And then over here on the right is kind of I would think of this as sort of a modern abstract geometric. I could see this working really well for, like activewear clothing, or perhaps even like a wallpaper or a pillow. So I love being able to see the variety and the breadth that comes from these different print classifications. But mostly the reason I'm showing you this is so that as you begin thinking about the types of things that you'd like to prompt, you know some of the print classifications, and then you can partner it with artistic terms that will get you closer to perhaps what you're envisioning, or just the areas of creativity that you'd like to explore. So here we see work from Patrick Morrissey, Victoria Snape, and Sierra Conan. The next classification is a pretty clear one. I mean, many of us have encountered floral prints in our day-to-day, I'm sure, whether that's on clothing or, in textiles or wallpapers around the home. So here we see three different kind of interpretations of what a floral might be. On the left, something that is sort of traditionally folksy, but it has a very nice interplay between texture, lightness, darkness, and then sort of the movement of the print. And in the future slides, once we get past classifications and layouts, we'll talk a bit about what makes a print appealing to us. And, typically when I talk about print, I'm always curious if anybody, has a strong opinion about something and they feel like they want to share. I'd be happy to let you, say something on your microphone if you're feeling like looking at like, I don't get it, or, oh my gosh, I really love it. Because one of the other things I found in sharing print with my students is that not everything appeals to everybody, right? We can't please everyone all the time. So it's also very interesting to sort of gut check yourself and see what it is about the artwork that you're looking at that maybe appeals to you or sort of puts you off. So here in the middle, we have a bit of photorealism partnered with the, kind of traditional plaid shapes of the, crossing stripes or lines. And I find this print to be one that some people really enjoy and some people really do not like at all. It's sort of amusing in that way. But the interplay of the different photorealistic textures and colors, I think, is super interesting. And that's one thing that we can do really well with Midjourney, which used to be a much more complicated process in traditional printmaking, was creating things that were photorealistic while at the same time being repeatable. And with new technology around printing on fabric, specifically digital printing, we can accomplish, any of this in the physical realm now, where, in the early days of printing, you'd be limited to about 12 colors and a much more artistic kind of interpretation like we see on the left with this print by Olivia Mew. And then on the right, I'll say this is my favorite of the three. I love this interpretation of kind of the X-rays playing with the leaves of the fabric, or the leaves of the flowers rather. And this does make a traditional floral print, though it is not, exactly what we might think of as, flowers, but it does, scratch that itch. So Michael Earl created the one in the middle here, and then Tolly Furman on the right. So these are floral prints. Next, we have representational and novelty prints, and this is a pretty broad category. A novelty print can include pretty much anything that is, and sometimes these are also referred to as conversational prints, but they're usually sort of interesting motifs. They can be animals, as you see here, but also things that are representational of real life, like these little, by the sea changing huts that would be, seen by the beach. But, within representational and novelty, these have a very large, possibility, everything from clothing, of course, but also like paper goods, wallpapers. And there are so many ways artistically that you can interpret a representational or novelty piece of art into your work. So here we see something by Sandy I'm going to mispronounce that word, say Joth. And this is a batik style. If you're not familiar with batik, it is a kind of traditional print method that originated in Africa and was then popularized by the Dutch, using wax to create these textures that then is removed. It's a very hands-on and complicated process, but being able to sort of digitally interpret, which is what this artist did, some of those printing techniques into your artwork can give it additional depth and movement and interest. This one here in the middle, I think, is really interesting, the overlapping giraffes and the way that the flowers are sort of layered in there. So this could also have some of those floral qualities. What you'll learn as we look through this is it's not mutually exclusive, right? You can't, something doesn't just, isn't just a floral print or isn't just a novelty print. They can kind of overlap one another. So this one, Giraffe Family, certainly reminds me of something I think you'd see on like the cover of a notebook. And there's just so many places for seamless repeat patterns to be used. So this is by Katharina London. And then finally, Charlotte Mason for Paper Chase. Paper Chase is a stationery company, created this one called By the Sea, of all these cute little, changing huts, if you will. And again, representational or novelty prints could be anything from, print made of sneakers to something that has got food or, little, I don't know, in home interiors or something like that. So as you explore this and sort of do your own research around what kind of prints compel you for your own collections, there is so much to explore within this category. And I also find that a lot of people, this one's a real divisive print on the right. Some people really love it and some people don't like it at all. All right, next we have digital. So digital prints have that feeling of, coming from the world of the screen. Sometimes these can be referred to, like here in the center, like glitch art, or sort of a interpretation of a collage here on the right, and then over here, sort of interplay of gradient. All of these, feel like they belong either, maybe on some kind of activewear, or could be used in sort of a modern space as part of the decor. But they also work well for stationery and other things. I really love the breadth that we can create with digital print. And digital interpretations. And really all that is saying that the inspiration for the artwork is coming from that digital realm in whatever way. Typically, these would not be made by hand, where if we were to go back a slide, perhaps this motif of the bird or the butterfly would have been drawn by hand by the artist and then taken into the digital realm. Whereas here, all of this starts in the digital realm and has a really interesting feel to them. I love the movement here of this middle one. Every time I put this up on the screen, it catches my eye. And this is another one by Patrick Morrissey. We saw a piece of his work previously. This one over here by H. Scott Roth is also really interesting because of the use of color. And then I love a collage or an interpretation of a collage print. And this one's by Jeffrey Isom, and I in Presense formed the studio. So, all right, and then we have two more to get through, I believe. Next is abstract style prints. These can range, again, much like we talked about with representational or novelty, a pretty broad swath. So, with abstract prints, it's really more about the texture, though in some ways you can insert into it a little bit more of that representational or novelty. I don't know if you all noticed these cyclists kind of hidden into this abstract mountain landscape. And then they can have things that maybe would be referred to as like grunge or grit, where you see those textures interplaying. And it's really about, the colors and how they work together to create something that's very interesting to the eye from far away. So they can have a lot of depth and texture to them, like we have over here on the right, or can be very simple, like this 2-color print by Isabel Lucina over here on the left. So Claire Vickery created the mountain cyclist in the center, and then Naomi Hefetz did this undergrowth, which I think is such a really interesting and compelling print that could be used across a variety of products. All right, and then finally illustrative, and this is kind of open to interpretation, but illustrative really does have the appeal of being from the artist's hand. So over here we have the print by Vanessa Hafsey, which is a coral inspired print. And I love the mix of the watercolor textures, the ink lines, and then you can see sort of this natural paper texture there. So in taking these concepts of traditional handwork and bringing them into Midjourney or another AI software, you can really explore and expand your horizons of creating print techniques. And I'm going to show you a little later in our workshop how to take some of your drawings and then play with them within the Midjourney settings. We also have this one here in the middle called Kingfisher by Lucy Hardcastle. I am so fascinated by this print every time I look at it because I love the hand-drawn kind of furry texture, and the light in it, the blue color, makes it almost feel like it's shimmering or has LED lights behind it. I'm not sure if this appeals to everyone, but it always catches my eye, and the movement, because of the way that it's drawn, keeps me going through it. And then finally, this one over here, another one by Naomi Heffitz, and this is called Chained, and the illustrative properties of the chain is why I classified it with this group, but it also has that abstract color texture in the background. So I look forward to hearing any of your questions once we get to the question and answer part of this. But again, this is just to kind of get us thinking about print. I think that one of the best ways to develop your eye and to be strong at creating your own print collections for fashion or for any other sort of consumer good is really looking at a lot of other print art and analyzing it and thinking about what you like. So when we are analyzing a print, one of the first things we want to train our eye to do is to understand the print layouts. Within Midjourney, when you're creating your tiles, it's going to be basically a block print. It will create something that repeats seamlessly on all sides, but it'll lay out just like this, just like in a grid. However, if you use different terminologies for layouts as you're prompting, you can experiment with this and see some of these different layouts come through. Or perhaps you utilize AI in a way to help you create illustrated motifs, and then you are using digital software like Photoshop or Illustrator to actually pull those motifs from what you've created using AI and then lay them out on your own. So you might want to experiment with more complex layouts like half brick. So this is exactly what it sounds like, right? Is these tiles are laid out in a brick formation. So the each row is kind of starting halfway through the block of the row below. And then this also can be, turned the opposite direction and referred to as a half drop. So it's kind of like they're just going vertically instead of horizontally. And then to get into some other kind of, these are sort of the basics, right? The block, the half brick, and the half drop. But there are other configurations you can play with, like creating diamonds using your motifs. I also am a big fan of the OG, which is kind of a traditional, this always makes me think of the 1960s or the 1970s, but this is a specific type of print where you have sort of an onion or bulb shaped motif that's fitting into the other motifs to create kind of this interplay between positive and negative space. And you can use sort of this configuration or concept to put together other motifs that don't necessarily have to be exactly this kind of simple shape. And then one of the most kind of, I think, popular, interesting, and modern ways to create a print is just a toss or a random. So it's just taking your motif and sort of treating it like you had a handful of confetti and you threw it out there on a piece of paper. It makes for prints that feel a little bit more, they feel less repetitive, perhaps, if the layout is done properly. So that gives a more expansive feeling, as opposed to things that really do have a very nice and tidy, almost systematic layout to them. So toss and random is great because if we think about when we are printing on fabric, if our print has a direction to it, meaning there is a clear up and a clear down, then when we create our garments, we have to lay out the pattern pieces with the artwork. Whereas something like this, a toss or a random, can create like a non-directional print, and any of these layouts can as well. But the non-directional print allows for better yield in creating clothing. It also gives you a little bit more flexibility as a designer with how you use the print, because there's no clear up. Like, for example, when we saw the giraffe print or some of the novelty representational prints, those had a clear up and a down. And then stripe, we've all seen lovely stripes, but stripes don't have to be just made of lines, right? You can create them from any motif when they're laid out in a nice tidy row, just like that. And then dot. So again, a simple polka dot like what I'm wearing. This configuration of the dot, as you can see, is kind of either, depending on how you want to look at this one, is either, kind of making a diamond shape, or it is in that half brick or half drop sort of layout. Again, it would depend on how you were drawing those shapes with your eye to configure it and how you laid it out. And we're going to get into much more advanced techniques in the second session where we really practice laying out prints together. And then finally, plaid and check. So another pretty classic layout for a print. Plaids are consistently popular, across all types of apparel and home goods. And, this gingham style check right here has had a ton of popularity, partially thanks to some of the costumes in the Barbie movie, but also it's just, it's a classic and it has a great feeling to it. So I hope that this has given you some great context for understanding print. We're going to talk a little bit more about what makes a print successful, and then we're going to start talking about using AI for this. So, all right. So to understand repeat compositions, I'm going to review with you some of the important aspects of design. So different design terminology and how it works within repeat art. So one of the first things that you want to understand within repeat composition is the dominant element. So in each print, dominant element may speak differently to different eyes. We are each individually drawn to certain colors and shapes. We all have a different path of cognition as we look at artwork, but to understand, from a dominant element place, what we are looking at, we're comparing two elements in a design. So either the elements feel equal, or in some way one will exert dominance over the other. So the dominant element in this case for me is this square right here in the middle, is where my eye goes first. And so it also can create this feeling of almost having control over some of the less dominant elements, like, perhaps you perceive that these lines are being pulled towards the square visually. And the reason this is important is because it has a stronger visual weight. So this pulls your eye in and it seems to just kind of hold it there. Though good printmaking and print design will have other motifs and other movements that will allow your eye to kind of move through the composition and take in the full piece of art. So as you are looking at other prints and analyzing them, ask yourself, what is the dominant element to my eye? Is this something that feels more balanced? Focal points are another important aspect of this, right? We can't apply emphasis to everything. So just like a dominant element, a focal point can also, kind of land in both spaces. And this holds your attention, but it should, be kind of noticed perhaps after any other element that has more dominance, or perhaps that focal point is the dominant element. Each person, I've shown this artwork to a lot of folks, and different people perceive it differently. My eye is always kind of drawn to the diamond shape that is floating on the darkest sort of ground color, the background color. But for others, they really follow the movement of the red and others. So again, analyzing print and looking at it is really going to give you a clear understanding of what appeals to your eye. But then as you take your art and ask other people what they think of it, you should be, trying to figure out where it is that their eye goes. What is the focal point for them when they look at your repeat composition? And then as we talk about, dominance and focal points, within that is what would be referred to as a visual hierarchy. So for those of you with a background in design, graphic design, or something like that, you probably have heard this term before. But, the visual hierarchy in your artwork should match the conceptual hierarchy of what you're trying to create. When you base that visual, creating a visual harmony within your print, then it allows you to know that people are interpreting your message in a way that makes sense. So here, this has a feeling of a dense jungle. Most of these kind of the ficus style leaves sort of sit up front, though this may not be the focal point for you or the item of dominance, but it does help to see that there is a hierarchy here as we work sort of further back into this sort of lush bush, if you will. And again, If you have the wrong visual hierarchy in the artwork you're creating, then the message that you're trying to share with others, whether that is, something that is very clearly like a very clear and distilled message you're trying to communicate, or it's just trying to give a feeling, if that hierarchy is sort of out of balance or people aren't perceiving it in the way you intended, then they may not be understanding what it is that you've created in the way that you would hope. And just a couple more before we move on to getting into our prompts. So eye flow is another really important part of what makes a great print. And that's just how your eye moves through content. That could be, anything from a graphic design, like a poster or something like that, to a beautiful repeat print. This is typically, influenced by that visual hierarchy, but for different people, like I mentioned before, different colors, shapes, and line effects will draw their eye in first. For some folks, the white in the back will move their eye through the print, whereas others will find their eye moving with the black color and the brown colors here. And then finally, understanding, contrast. And contrast is a great way to create those focal points, that visual hierarchy, the dominant feature of your print. And contrast is really just when two things are different, right? It's calling attention to itself because it is different than what is around. In the case here, the contrast comes in two ways. The color, right? The black versus white is one of the highest contrast color combinations we can create, but also the contrast of these sort of soft petals, if you will. We can interpret this as a flower, versus these more angular lines that sort of remind me of, like a tile, like a Moroccan tile of some sort. So anything that can be, contrasted can affect that visual weight, the direction of the print, and that can be used to help you draw in on that focal point. Again, playing with the degree of these things is really how, the scale of them, the layout is really how you're going to evolve your capacity for creating beautiful print, and also creating things that people either want to wear or, hang up in their home. So that is the first point of our lecture today, or our workshop today, just getting us in the mindset about print, because now we're going to start talking about how do we prompt prints that are beautiful and interesting and would have some value to a person out there who'd want to wear that. So here comes the AI piece. I have one more thing I want to tell you about before we get into it, though, in terms of prompting repeat prints, and it's just a clarifying piece. So in the print industry, we sometimes refer to all over prints, meaning a seamless repeated print, as an AOP. So it's just a little piece of jargon for you. And then we can contrast that with placement prints or graphics, right? So here on the left, we see butterflies as an all over print, a seamless repeat design. And here on the pants, we see what would be a placement print or a graphic. You can use Midjourney or AI, obviously, to create either of these. It's really just a degree of understanding what your intent is with your finished garment or the thing that you're creating. So when it comes to the seamless repeat print, right, it should align where there's no visible lines or seams that we can see. And then the difference between these two is that an all over print is typically applied to the media, like fabric or wallpaper or whatever it might be, all in one print, right? It's just applied across the entire body of fabric, and then usually put onto a roll. So then that would be cut and sewn into different sizes of clothing. Whereas with a graphic over here on the right, we would typically finish the clothing first and then place the graphic, though processes can vary. But also we have to think about, a print, like an all over seamless print, in its size or scale can appeal to a variety of body sizes and shapes. Whereas graphics, as the body sizes, change and the shape of the body changes, the graphic may also need to be scaled or changed size so that it appeals to the person who's going to wear it and it looks nice on them. So keeping in mind that when you're designing prints and you're selecting the scale and the color and all of that, what is your intent with this? Is it for somebody to wear, in which case you have to think about what decisions people make when they want to wear something. The color, does it look nice on them? The scale of the print, is it flattering to their body size and shape? Does it draw attention to the right features or cover up the things that they're trying to be modest about? or is it, too large in scale where it almost creates something that seems a little, I don't know, not desired. I've worked on some projects where we've created prints and then got them sewn up into garments and then realized that it maybe was a little vulgar, the way that things were sitting on the body. All right, so let's begin. The first thing that you need to know in order to create a seamless repeat print is that you have to add a parameter to the end of your prompt, which is --tile. So this creates these seamless repeating patterns. You can see here I've included this simple prompts for all of these different works of art underneath the images of them. So you can kind of see where I came from with this. So this is a very simple prompt, etched style daisy floral artwork. And by applying this parameter at the end of the prompt, you can see I have received back this image, which when I took into Illustrator, I could very easily set up and check the seam lines. Sometimes things can be slightly off, so it's important that you check them closely. But in the second session of these workshops, we're going to get more into the technical aspect of preparing the artwork for print. Right now, we're just making fun ideas. So that's the first thing to know. That's how we get these seamless tiles. But I'm going to talk you through a variety of tips and tricks for your parameters and your prompting that creates really interesting artwork. So if you played with Midjourney, you've probably utilized the aspect ratio, but it's important to remember that now within Midjourney, we can put any numbers within the aspect ratio value. So if you wanted to create like a very long and narrow border print, you could very easily do that. Not everything has to be square or, like a traditional rectangular shape, like 2.3 or, a 4x7. And so this is, just kind of what the common different aspect ratios mean. But in keeping in mind that you can change them, you can, take this is the same prompt with two different aspect ratios, one more horizontal, so giving us kind of more of a spanning forest feeling, whereas here, when we do this in a vertical layout, a 9:16, this would be suitable for the background of your smartphone, we're getting something that feels a lot taller and maybe less, lengthy across the way that it's laid out. So I do encourage you to try the same prompts and try it with different aspect ratios to see what happens, right? What results you get back and how that sort of changes the layout, the focal points, and the visual hierarchy of the artwork. So I told you when we started, I love a collage. So I make a lot of these, I make a lot of collages by hand, but I also play a lot with collage technique as part of the print artwork that I make in Midjourney. Another thing that if you are already familiar with Midjourney, maybe you've played with, is the chaos parameter. So this is either --chaos, the full word, or you can shorten it to --c. So this is really fun because what it does is it influences how varied the initial image grids are. So if you have a high chaos value, for example, the highest value is 100, it's going to produce more unusual and unexpected results across the grid, which is the first 4 images that you see. Whereas if you have a lower chaos, it's going to be kind of more reliable, consistent, and repeatable. And you'll see plenty of examples of this as we move through the future slides. So keeping in mind that the default of chaos is always set to 0. If you want to increase that chaos, you'll be getting back much more varied results. So here you can see a prompt that says line drawing, style artwork featuring vines. And you can see here on the left with the chaos at 0, these are pretty traditional prints, right? They feel like things that you maybe have seen before, can look a bit like they belong, a kitchen wallpaper or, a lovely like throw pillow or perhaps a blouse. And then as we turn the chaos up, here's chaos at 50 and chaos at 100, you can see how varied and sort of far out it starts to push the interpretation of just that simple statement of line drawing and vines. So in the chaos at 50, we see a pretty clear interpretation of vines across 3 of these. And then as we push the chaos to 100 here on the right, the interpretation of vine has gone, pretty outside of what we might be expecting. So as you try to perhaps speed up your developments or just explore more artistic styles, I love pushing the chaos up so that I can see a lot of different ideas and then perhaps pick a few of them to sort of continue my exploration in creating a print collection. The next thing that I would like for you to think about is the Midjourney styles. Again, the Midjourney bot has been trained to produce images that sort of favor its artistic style and composition. This varies from version to version as it updates, but we can influence how much it is stylized with that Midjourney style by using --stylize or the --s parameter. So that low stylization produces, images that are pretty close to the prompt, maybe a little less artistic. And then as you push that stylization number up, it starts to get more artistic and maybe less connected to the prompt. So unlike chaos, stylize sits at a default value of 100. It accepts larger integers up to 1,000, and you can also set it to 0. And I'm going to show you sort of what this looks like as you play with the same prompt across 6 different levels of stylize. So for this prompt, we went with a woodblock print folk art geometric design. Here on the left, we have the style at 0. We're getting kind of very choppy. And I think that these prints really, some of them don't look quite finished. There are aspects of them that could be a great starting place, but they do feel like they don't have quite that artistic touch. And then as we press this forward, you're going to see how the prints get more and more artistic as the style is cranked up, even with the same prompt. So here it is at default of 100. So these are very pretty and usable prints. But then as we turn up the style to 250, and then as we see it in higher style levels going on later, it becomes more interesting, more artistic. You feel like you're seeing a bit more of an interpretation of the artist's hand here, as opposed to things that almost look like they're tracings or stencils of something else. They don't really feel quite finished. And then as we push into even higher levels of stylization, you can see here at 500, we're getting things that feel very much like perhaps an ornate wallpaper, or have a bit more depth and colored variation within the way that the artwork is coming about. And then as we start getting into that really high or extremely high levels of stylization at 750 or 1,000, we're actually losing some of the intent of the prompt, right? Where we requested a woodblock, we're starting to see things look more three-dimensional, where a woodblock print would typically be somewhat flat, almost like a stamp. And then here, you're getting a large amount of depth from that by increasing the style. So keeping in mind that if you have a prompt and a concept that you really, really like, but the results you're getting back aren't quite feeling like what you'd imagined, that you can adjust, these style levels from 0 to 1,000 and any number in between. I just worked in increments of basically 250 to just show how much it significantly changes. Okay, and so this is my favorite thing actually with developing prints not in Midjourney, but in Niji. So if you haven't played with Niji before, it's a collaboration between Midjourney and Spellbrush, and it's trained on anime and illustrative styles. It knows a lot about anime aesthetics, and a lot of people use this to create beautiful scenery and characters for illustrated anime styles. But it's also so talented at making beautiful artwork. So currently we are on Niji version 5. And so in order to turn this on, unless you already have it on in your settings for some reason, you just need to use --Niji, Niji, and 5 to keep it on the current model. You could change that number backwards if you wanted to experiment with different versions from the past. So here you see the comparison of dry pastel artwork of flowers on the left. So this is just in the Midjourney server, no style applied to it, just the prompt. And then over here, you can see how it was interpreted in Niji. It has a softer, more, painterly, very dainty, and so it just feels so much like it was created by the artist's hand. It has a really, really interesting depth to it and softness that sometimes is difficult to interpret within Midjourney. So the next thing I'm going to tell you about Niji is the different styles. It actually offers 4 styles. Here we see it in the original style. I don't need to prompt for this to be turned on to the original style. However, if I wanted to play with some of the other styles in Niji, then I would need to add the different styles. So here on the left, it's the same prompt in Niji 5. Try to get my little thing to go away down there, with the style being expressive. So the first one on the left is the expressive style. In the middle here, you see the style as scenic. So it's giving a very different kind of interpretation of the color. It feels, there's a lot of depth, and it does feel to me more scenic, whereas the expressive feels a bit more simplified, and the use of color has less depth as compared to scenic. And then finally, cute, which I totally love because it adds in like little animals. Sometimes you can see that there's like a little, I don't know, bunny cat thing. But I feel like cute does a really nice job of creating very interesting color effects, and then, giving you kind of some unexpected little treats within your artwork. So in order to utilize this combination of Niji and the different styles, just remember you have to prompt on the Niji, so --Niji 5, and then turn on one of these other styles. So expressive, as seen on the left, scenic, and cute. And again, this allows you to fine tune your artwork a little bit better and get it dialed into an aesthetic that perhaps is closer to what you'd imagined. So other ways to quickly work through ideation is to utilize either the repeat or what I'll show you next, which is permutations. So repeat basically just takes, the prompt that you have and repeats the grid whatever number of times that you've put in there. So that's --repeat or --R. And so, it helps you to move more quickly through visual exploration. Depending on your subscription level will depend on how many repeats you can plug in there. So obviously the higher levels of subscriptions are going to be able to run more repeats in a single prompt. And one other thing to note is you can only use this in fast or turbo mode. So if you're on relaxed mode, it's not going to work. But also if you use your reroll button, it's not going to do the same number of repeats. You need to reprompt with that -- and whatever the number is. And then also remember that once you've put in this part of the prompt, in Midjourney is going to ask you to say yes, that you want to create 3 of those prompts so that you didn't do that on accident and all of a sudden burning up all those precious fast hours on something you didn't intend to do. So here's an example of kind of what that looks like. The 3D artwork of water, I had the repeat on 3, so then I received 12 different versions back with that. So again, just increasing my pace of exploration. Let's say I had the chaos up to like 50 or 100 here, I would have 12 very different prints. But because I didn't have that on, they're all similar in their own ways, each with their unique sort of interpretations of 3D plus water, and some, really, really interesting ideas in here as well. So the other thing that I am definitely obsessed with when it comes to developing prints quickly is permutations. So if you haven't played with a permutation prompt, you use your /imagine to start your command, just like you would with any other prompt. But instead of, you do your lists of your prompt words, but then you basically use your curly braces, so these right here, in your prompt, so you can create multiple versions of something. So I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second, because if you haven't played with this yet, me saying this, you're like, wait, what does this mean exactly? So again, just like the repeat, based on your level of subscription, it will allow you to run a certain number of jobs within the prompting. And in a second, I'll show you an example prompt. But you can also, include more complex things like image prompts, which I'll talk about, changing the parameters like chaos or stylize, and, adjusting the prompt weights as well. You can also do permutations on the parameters if you're feeling like getting really advanced with it. So for example, here I have in curly brackets, oil painting, they're supposed to say, yeah, crayon drawing and wet ink. So 3 different styles of artwork in the curly brackets. And then city, sand, and abstract. So I also included 3 kind of different subjects for my artwork. I also turned on my chaos to 25. I turned my style up to 250. I put it in Niji and I put it in scenic style. So a very advanced prompt with a lot of stuff going on. And just like with repeats, it's going to ask me for my permission to confirm that I want all 9 prompts, because by typing in this one prompt with 1, 2, 3 in the first set, 1, 2, 3 in the second set, 3 times 3 is 9. So 9 total prompts will come out. So you have to say yes. And then if you clicked on show prompts, it will give you another window that will list out every single unique prompt that you're running. So there are the 9 unique prompts that came out of just this one prompt that I typed in. So how do they look? It's kind of an interesting exploration. Some of these, like this one, maybe not so usable, but some pretty interesting ideas came through as you see the, kind of the combination of oil painted city with the Niji and the scenic, sand, and then abstract styles. So some really pretty like brush stroke textures and abstract designs. And then the next one was the city. Yeah. Oh, I might have, oh, this is all oil painted. Yes, I'm sorry. I confused my own self. Here's the crayon artwork, which I don't know, it doesn't totally look like crayon, but that's okay. I think that these are some really cool novelty or representational prints. And then getting into sand, some pretty interesting interpretations of what that might look like. I love this one on the bottom right. And then the abstract, again, just the same medium with a different subject. And getting back, this variety of artwork just from one prompt is really exciting because there's a lot here to explore, right? And you can utilize, if you had, say, the same subject and the same medium that you wanted to sort of explore, you can also do things like colors, right? You can have within those curly brackets, make it a pastel color palette, make it a vivid color palette, make it a neutral color palette. So then you can also explore within that what sort of colorways look best to your eye. So another round of permutation. So I highly encourage you, if you've got the fast hours and you want to see what happens really quickly, this is it's a real delight to play with. All right, well, before I get into showing you a few things about mocking up your prints on garments in Midjourney, I just wanted to show you a little bit about using an image prompt. If you haven't done this before, I swear this looks a lot more complicated than it really is. You may have seen this if you've read the Midjourney manual, but essentially you can use an image to help start your prompting process or to use as a reference for derivative work by including a URL for that image prompt. So that can be as easy as, posting that picture into your Midjourney server, your Discord server, and then just right-clicking on it, copying that link and pasting it into your overall prompt. So there you have your prompt text in the middle, just whatever you'd like to imagine, and then your parameters at the end, right? Your style, your Niji, your chaos, whatever it is that you'd like to do to better control it. And so the only other thing I'd like for you to know as you're using image prompts, I'm going to show you some stuff with your sketches, is here's one of the prints that came out of my permutation. I just grabbed it. And if I plug this into the prompt, like we looked at here, right? There it is, pasted in there, let's imagine. I can control how strong Midjourney will read the image as its reference by turning on --IW. So essentially, the range for version 5 goes from 0 to 2. The standard or default is at 1, and it's the same for Niji. So just to see sort of what that looks like, here is what I referenced in for these prompts. And here it is at a 0.5 weight, because you can do decimals here. And then here it is at 1, and here it is at 2, the highest one. So they all look very similar, but this one certainly on the far right looks the closest in terms of coloration and layout. to the original, as opposed to these, which have a bit more of their own artistic interpretation. The color's a little bit different. So yeah, so that's a primer for all of the things that you're going to now start doing in this workshop series. The second session of this will get a lot more technical, but we're going to start just by giving you some ideas for ways that you can work in Midjourney to create your repeat patterns and then maybe apply them to a garment made with AI. So I love starting with my own artwork and seeing how Midjourney interprets it. So essentially here I have like kind of a loose little sketch that I did of, some tropical leaves just on my iPad, nothing fancy, just some quick things. And then you can see here, I posted it into my little server that I have. And then I right click on it and copy that link, as I mentioned in the last prompt. And here you can see some different interpretations of, how certain prompts might kick back different results using my sketch as a starting point. Here on the left, we have a very kind of different interpretation of my print, though we're getting tropical leaves back. It has that watercolor art feeling to it a little bit, but the style's up to 400. So it's taking its own liberties, and it's at that default image weight of 1. So the chaos being up is giving me a variety of different results, right? We're here on the right, I have the image weight up to 2. So it's very obvious that it's really reading my artwork as part of the layout here. And we have, the same prompt coming in with the colors and all of that, but you really see a lot more of this original work in the second one. But some of the other fun things that you can do, of course, is play with things like the color. So here I have the image weight at 1.5, so a little bit above the default. And I changed the colors from teal and blue to pink and orange. And you can see it plugged in some pink leaves for me there. So, experiment with your prompt and your artwork, putting it in there to see how you can, utilize your own drawings, your own sketches, and have Midjourney help imagine what they might look like in different variations. I really have a lot of fun with doing this, and it doesn't have to be like the drawing that I showed that actually had color in it. It could just be like a pencil sketch of, the outline of a motif that you're interested in, like a little flower or something. And then as you play with that, you can get a lot of really, really interesting results. And they're already put into that seamless tile for you, so you don't have to spend the time laying everything out. All right, and we are going to go a little bit past 10 o'clock, but I just have one more thing I'd like to share with you, which is a new kind of a thing I've been playing with in mocking up the prints in Midjourney on garments. So method 1 is, I actually created this print separately for a different project, so this was not created in Midjourney, but let's say you're a print designer already and you have your artwork in there. You may choose to use the /describe method and upload this to see how it would describe your artwork that exists. If you're creating the art in Midjourney, you would just use some of the language from your prompt. So here, what I did was I plugged in this, cute little pink and white kind of 1960s inspired print, and it gave me some really good keywords. Me reading through the 4 of these, recognizing that I need to have clearly pink and white flower pattern and maybe 1960s cartoon or bold forms. So playing with different terms coming from these, not using them exactly. So that's step 1. But then I've also created, using a basic prompt, just kind of like an image of a model wearing a white t-shirt. I would suggest on any of this, as you try these processes, that you prompt the model to be wearing something white, because it does make it a little bit easier when you get into blending these together. So I'm not using the blend method, I'm actually using image prompting, right? But I'm putting in both the link for the artwork itself and the link for the fashion image that I've created. You can see here, I have a combination in my prompt of the original prompt about my model being on the beach. And then instead of saying that they're wearing a white shirt, I said wearing a pink and white flower pattern, and then included some of that information that I got back in Describe. Again, if you created the print in Midjourney, you would just utilize some of those keywords from your prompts. I have the image weight up all the way to 2 here. And what you're noticing, right, is it's not a direct copy of this print. As if you have experience with AI, you know that it kind of takes things and reimagines them for you. But certainly getting closer to sort of exploring what that might look like on a garment. Now, I have my issues with this method. This is a faster method, but the clothes look kind of flat, right? The fabric's not coming through with the level of drape that I would want. Of course, I could perhaps add that in post-production if I have graphic design skills, but method 2 is just an extra step, but that extra step takes it to another level. So here, instead of just putting in my flat artwork and my model picture and my image prompt and putting them together, I'm actually starting by putting my artwork in and then describing, the fabric that it's going on. For this specific project, I was working with a polyester knit because we're playing with a certain print method and wanted to show a pretty, a representation of the fabric that somebody might be using. So you see here, I have in my prompt again that the description that I got back from Describe, and then I've added in here draped jersey knit polyester. You could put any fabric in there that you want, right? Draped chiffon, silk chiffon, draped, organza, taffeta, leather, whatever it is that you want this design to go on. And you can see here, it's giving me more shadows and a little bit more movement to the fabric. So it feels a little bit more realistic. And then in upscaling one of these options, which was this one on the bottom right, I then went in and did very similar to what we saw in the previous method. I image prompted with both of them, but instead of it being a flat print, it's actually, it's actually kind of the print on a fabric. And here are some of the examples that it kicked back. Again, it flipped the colors. I'm not going to get an exact replica of the artwork because we're running it through Midjourney so many times, but it's getting closer and the fabric looks a lot more like it's actually on the body. The shadows are more realistic. It has a much higher quality appearance to it. And then you could take it into post and fix some of those shadows and brighten that pink up if you desired it. So again, to go through this process, you will create a repeat print and plug that print in to your Imagine prompt. Add a description of the draped fabric that you'd like it to be on. And if you want the print to be closer to what the design is, remember to adjust your image weight. Then create your fashion image, ideally a white garment, but you can play with it being something that's not white too. And then image prompt linking both the print on the fabric image, any keywords for your prompt, and then see what happens and what you get back. So it's a fast hour, right? We kind of started by going through the basics of recognizing what print design is about, classifications of the layouts, things that we look for in a successful print and why that is important. Because I assume if you're coming to this workshop, you have an intention to take what you're creating using artificial intelligence and bringing it into the real world in some way. And that is amazing. But with my long background in creating physical product and selling it out there in the real world, you also have to create something that people have a need for, that people want to adorn their bodies or their homes or, something in their life with. And so keeping in mind that there are certain, attributes that a successful print has, you can go out there and research and look at lots of, lovely prints, whether you're out shopping or you're looking through books or you're just cruising around on the internet to help you understand what is successful in your eyes and what will appeal to the target customer that you would be creating repeat print art for. So just as a sneak peek of next session, which will be September 8th, we're going to talk about taking these print files and getting them ready. So this is actually the step that kind of gets you closer to being able to be profitable or being able to generate some income from this. So I'll show you how to check your repeats in Photoshop and Illustrator and how to correct any issues that you might have. I'll show you how to convert your AI prints into vectors so that you can do a variety of different recoloring methods from a manual traditional method, but also introducing you to the Adobe Illustrator generative AI recolor tool that just came out in beta, which is really fun. So you can use text descriptions to help you generate color palettes. And then we'll get into some advanced mock-ups. So we'll talk about, applying designs to flat sketches, which are the sort of engineering or technical drawings of clothing, so that you can experiment with your colorways. And then I will also show you how to apply these patterns using the new Illustrator mockup tool that they have just launched to apply your patterns to clothing. So that was our fast hour. We started about 6 minutes past, and I guess that I came in exactly on time. So thank you so much for your attention today. It was my pleasure to share all of this with you. I hope you've learned something, or if you knew about these things around print design or about prompting in Midjourney, that maybe a light bulb moment, a connection has been made of ways that you can use these tools to further your creativity. And I hope to see you again on September 8th to learn about all of this. And I'll turn it back over to Francesca.
Thank you, Jenna. That was brilliant. And I know you have to shoot off, and we went over time. So if anyone has any questions, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I can post it in my email here, but I've got a little bit of time, actually. I can hang out for about 15-20 minutes if there are folks with questions.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So yeah, I'll hand it over to the audience. Please do post your questions. So I'd love to know a little bit about your experience being a teacher and an instructor, and as well as working with brands. Like, where do you see the most kind of movement and traction right now? Do you an adoption? Is it more at sort of university level, or is it in brands?
I think that we're seeing it a lot from, in my experience working with textiles. I've been sharing some of the AI work that I've been doing around interpreting these physical fabrics into, images like that. And so I've been seeing a lot of interest, not necessarily from the brands yet, but actually from people kind of in the pre-production stages. So folks that are making textiles, kind of giving us examples of what that might look like in a garment. So that has been really cool. I have students, of course, that are very curious in using AI for their own practices, but it's been more of an educational process, I would say, with the brands. Like, they're kind of opening their mind up to ways that this can be used. And for people that make fabric, I think they see the value in being able to just communicate the type of garment without having to go through the physical prototyping process. So
what are the traditional roles that this would actually apply to? It's sort of, is it like a textile? Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's been a big part of it. Like, for example, one of the projects that we just did is we have a very nice activewear fabric made with Repreve recycled polyester fibers. That's very popular with a lot of big, athletic and yoga brands here in the United States. And so we launched new colors. And so I used a description of the fabric and then paired that with the Pantone shades and a little bit of work in Photoshop to basically show, here's how like a sports bra or a legging might look in this color, which saves a lot of time. I'm able to tell the story much more quickly. And it also saves resources, right? We're not using fabric to make a prototype that we basically will put on someone and take a photo of. And that's kind of the life of the garment beyond whomever receives it, what they do with it. So it helps to speed up the process, but it also is more efficient in terms of use of resources and sustainable, practices.
Super. Please put up your hand if you've got any questions. So what are your next steps? Because you've obviously got like a really deep understanding of this space. Where do you evolve to next?
Yeah, I think part of it is just continuing to like educate and inspire people to utilize this tool and see ways that, if they already are a practicing print designer, ways that it can help speed up their creativity, or for folks that are really, interested and curious about how to make print. But, for me, I've been working with this to design textiles for my house. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm doing, some renovating and redecorating, and I'm an avid collector of textiles, but a lot of my curtains are from like the 20s and the 30s, which have beautiful prints on them, but I don't want them to continue to deteriorate. So I'm messing with some ideas inspired by those, and creating stuff for my personal life, which could turn into products that I might sell or offer out to the general marketplace once I kind of have it dialed in. But yes, I mean, my next steps is really taking some of these AI designs and putting them on physical fabric.
I love that sort of the vintage side of things, because you could maybe even find like a really old photograph, figure out how to recolor it, what were the original colors, and then bring that back to life today. I think that would be such a fun project to work on.
Yeah.
All these 20s prints and 30s and 40s and Art Deco, and that would just really, especially if you work in the film industry and you're doing set design and costume. Yeah, there's so much potential. Okay, we've got a question from Fatima.
Oh, hi, Jenna. This is really great. I absolutely love the presentation. Couldn't wait to learn from your experiences, because I've also been experimenting with feeding images or my own handmade artworks, which are made from recycled textiles like vinyl and latex, and then creating new fabrics. So I was just curious, because at one point you were showing how you take the fabric into, is it Illustrator? Or
Yeah, we didn't get there yet, but for the next session, we will go into our next suite of software. So going from Midjourney into Photoshop and Illustrator to kind of finalize the process.
Oh, okay, that's going to be great. I hope I can see that particular session, because I was curious, because as you know, it's a ping that you get, the file that you get from Midjourney, and I was curious how you upscale it for final application to textiles. So I guess we'll learn about that.
Yeah, we will. I mean, some of the things I'll tell you though is it depends, with vectorizing and learning how to take this artwork and turn it into vector, then we are, resolution unbound, right? We can make it as large or as small because it's resolution independent, meaning it doesn't have the pixels that create that fuzzy, funky look that we are trying to avoid, right? So if we convert to vector, we can upscale, downscale, do whatever we'd like with it, and easily recolor. As for like works that perhaps need that kind of more gentle color gradation, things that look a little bit more like, hand drawn or hand painted, then we may have to work in Photoshop, in which case there's a variety of ways to, work from the upscales in Midjourney, or depending on what you're needing to do, you may need a more robust upscaling tool that you pay for outside of that. But typically speaking, you're not going to be creating prints, like repeat prints for the body that are, 20 something inches high, unless it's really necessary for, whatever you have intended. Typically speaking, most of your prints will be within the upscale range of what you get back from Midjourney. So like anywhere from 5 inches to like 12 inches.
Oh, that's great. That totally makes sense. And you were talking about, taking it to another program. I was looking at a program called SEDI, I think SEDDI from Spain, and they allow you to scan textiles and prepare them specifically for 3D use, which I thought was interesting. And also you were mentioning the Niji mode. So I've tried using Niji mode within Midjourney. But the one you were talking about sounds like it's a separate program or platform entirely?
No, it's right within it. You just have to turn it on. Like, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I'm using.
Yeah. And
Thanks
that
so much.
the style part is really fun, because that's new in version 5, the expressive, scenic, and cute options. And I think it just like helps to even push it further. So I would love to see what you create.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. This was incredible. Can't wait for the next session.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the kind words, and thanks for being here.
Awesome. So a question from me, which is, in the future, do you see a time where, for example, an e-commerce website, you're looking to buy some new cushions, and that customers would type their own prompts? And what impact would that have on like supply chain and manufacturing and sustainability if everyone wants to just create their own things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this has been something that's actually been happening with Joann Fabrics, which is a fabric retailer here in the United States. I don't know if everybody has access to Joann, but they purchased a company that was kind of similar to Spoonflower. Spoonflower is a print-on-demand service where artists can upload their work. I don't know that they accept AI artwork right now. It's typically traditional printmaking, but with what Joanne did, they purchased this company that they called My Fabric. And essentially you could go on there and have your fabrics custom printed, change the colors, change the scale, not, sort of text to design, but I think that that is sort of the next step. And the fashion industry, especially with the digital solutions like digital printing, which means that you can print as little as, this much fabric to as much as tens of thousands of yards, allows for people to easily customize. And so the industry has been going in that direction for a long time. And so I would be very curious to see, how long it takes for the consumer to feel comfortable making those decisions, what the output kind of looks like, right? Because folks, like we talked about, who have studied print know what makes a solid print design, whereas somebody that's kind of just an average consumer typing in like birds in a pink room, they may or may not make the best design judgment decisions. But then again, if it's for them, if they like it, it's for them. So, but yeah, I see that coming. I think that it'll probably within the next few years, we'll see some companies experimenting with giving that control over to the consumer.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I think of all of the kind of NFT art, and the demographic there was probably a younger audience. So they probably thought, wow, this is beautiful art. But, realistically, it's not very sophisticated. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so I'd be curious to see, like, if people start experimenting with something like that, if they are pleased with what they get back in a way more than like something that was traditionally created through the product development process. And I'd imagine they probably would be, because it's like, it's kind of coming from their brain in some level. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's like personalization. You feel more connected to that thing when it arrives. Even if it's ugly, you would never want to admit that you're bad at creating designs.
It's precious to you. Yeah. And I think the same thing with like the new Adobe tools for generative AI for recoloring, right? Like even that, taking away some of the technical parts of it that somebody might deal with, where they're actually selecting colors and they can type in like desert sunset color palette, and then it can turn the plaid into that for them.
And I wanted to ask about new materials. So there are a lot of new materials being created that are more sustainable, from like algae and things like that. And we did one competition which was bioluminescence. It's always fascinated me, like things that glow. And we actually did some research into real materials and where you can get bioluminescence. So you get it in algae in the sea, you get it in this weird fungi in a tree, but in a very clean, cold place. So like in Latin America. So, and you can make it synthetically. So do you see that generative AI could lead to even more materials being kind of innovated and created?
I can see that absolutely from a, research, kind of a research partner perspective, right? Treating AI as something that can explore, more quickly than we can as humans, like options for biomimicry and utilizing elements and things that already exist in nature. But the biggest challenge really, for any of the really innovative and interesting new, materials made from different sources like mycelium or algae, is the scaling. They are so cost prohibitive for the average consumer until they really hit the mass production market, which is a big challenge. Bolt threads, which was a very exciting darling of San Francisco, kind of tech and fabric intersection, making mycelium leather, worked with Stella McCartney. They just announced that they don't have any money to continue R&D, so they're not proceeding. I don't know that that means they're going out of business, but I know that it means that they cannot financially make that push to make it a more accessible textile. And so I think that's one of the challenges that we'll deal with unless more money becomes available for these. It's an important scientific pursuit, right? We dress ourselves every day, and we've utilized kind of the easiest materials or elements to create that, which is typically fossil fuels for mass production. So it's also shifting away from some of those bad habits that the fashion industry has become very reliant upon. And unfortunately, the way out is investment in the scientific aspect and the chemical aspect of it. So
Yeah, some of the sustainable options out there just not practical at all. You know, have
Right.
biodegradable clothing that's all falling apart, and you know, it's so definitely big challenges on that side of things. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really look forward to our next session and adding another tool to the mix. I'm sure that everyone's been very inspired and they're all going to go away and start creating all sorts of cushions and, you know, and new garments. So if anyone does go and do that, please do send what you create over to Jenna. We'd love to see your work and get inspired by you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be great. And we'll share some examples if you do, you know, make some really beautiful prints and you want them to be shared at the next workshop. I was going to do a little bit of a show and tell to showcase some of what you all have created and some of my other students so that you can see. Also, just it's amazing how each of our different brains does sort of find a style in AI, even though we, you know, we may not see it initially. After looking at lots of folks' work and how they prompt, you can truly see the individual's sort of perspective and interests come through in the art itself. So
yeah, that's fascinating.
Jenna, before we go, I know that in our prior conversation, you mentioned that you have other courses that you offer. So I just wanted to kind of open that up to you to share, you know, kind of like the extended scope of education and training that you offer for the community.
oh, thank you. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm currently in the midst of teaching an AI and fashion design class. That should be offered again, hopefully not in the fall, but at the beginning of next year, unless we have a cohort of people who are really excited about taking, you know, a 6-week class on doing everything from the print design piece to, you know, editorials and fashion shows and all of that. But you know, if you are coming into this class and you're really curious, or this workshop, and you're really curious about leveling up your graphic design skills, like you don't have, you know, that basic experience in Photoshop and Illustrator, and you want to learn how to, you know, make textile prints, not just using AI, but using your own hand and your own digital skill set. I teach at the Portland Fashion Institute starting in September, so there's still time to register. It starts in mid-September. A 6-week course on beginning graphic design where we cover Photoshop and Illustrator with the intent that we will take it into a computer surface design class. So then you can learn how to make your own prints and get a lot more detailed into some of these technical elements, which then can lead you to having freelance job opportunities, creating your own prints, working with brands. So it's really exciting, and I love teaching that class. So we'll send out a little follow-up email and we'll include the link to that if you're interested. It's online, but we will have, you know, a whole series of other great workshops coming up for you as well.
Fantastic. And we have a sketch to print competition coming up soon. So that will tie in very nicely.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Okay. Have a
All right,
lovely
well,
day, everyone.
hang out for just a second. Thank you again, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Jenna.